So what's going on, everybody? Just wrapped up a phenomenal video with Chief Master Sergeant retired Todd Simmons. I hate even saying retired because we just lost an amazing leader within the United States Air Force. So Chief Todd Simmons is the former Air University Command Chief, a phenomenal leader. Can't say that enough. And he has served at all levels of leadership within the United States Air Force. We talk about so many things during this interview, and I know it's going to be a great one. Oh, and Chief, congratulations on your retirement. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Rest TV. I'm Russell Lewis. I am a captain in the United States Air Force. I am an air battle manager, and I created a platform where civilian and military members can connect with the next generation of leaders. I understand the importance of mentorship because it changed my life. And I want to make sure that everybody gets that opportunity. So, without further ado, welcome to Mentorship Moments. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Mentorship Moment. I am joined with the one and only. Well, I can't even say. You're retired now, Chief.
Retired. I am out the game. I am officially a retiree as of 1 March 2020.
So before 1 March, I would have been joined with Command Chief for Air University, Chief Master Sergeant, now retired, Todd Simmons. Sir, how's it going?
It's going great. I appreciate the opportunity. It's a sunny day up here in Maryland, so I'm going to enjoy hopefully getting outside a little bit. As we've been kind of stuck in the house for the last 60 days of everyone going through this pandemic. So hopefully get out the house going well. Wife is at home teleworking today, so we're going to take a break here in a while.
One thing I wanted to talk about was, before we get into like the main questions, the meat and potatoes of this interview, I wanted to talk about what you are doing now. Life outside of the military, life outside of the Air Force. What is Chief retired Todd Simmons got going on?
So Todd Simmons, yeah. So Todd Simmons, trying to re-identify with that individual, 25 and a half years of being in the military and, always being associated with the rank or being associated with the organization. It's been fun the last couple of months just re-identifying with myself. So, what I'm doing now and this current situation that not only the nation but the world is going through has presented a great opportunity. So I started my own company last year, April of 2019, Courageous Leadership Alliance, which is essentially a leadership development, organizational culture platform that I primarily was doing on the corporate side, but kind of fell back into helping out the military, found some great things that we do, partnering with other folks to bring organizational culture, effective organizational culture at the forefront. So we were doing very well with that, with a pretty heavy travel schedule after I retired in December. And then so we're, everything regardless of what company or it is right now is kind of used to doing platforms face-to-face is now, that is temporarily terminated. So what I'm doing now, I've done probably about 20 webinars focusing on organizational culture, 60 to 90 minutes, been helping other organizations put together virtual platforms because this is an all new thing for most people. But for me, I've been in a virtual world for a while now, teaching. I was teaching college for 13 years while on active duty. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I was in a virtual world teaching online. So I'm very comfortable with it. So just helping out right now, just, having a good time, being able to still contribute, being a former airman and still contribute to most of those webinars have been with active duty units.
We talk about struggle, and I think a lot of people are going through that struggle right now. A lot of businesses, a lot of coaches, trainers, and professional development professionals, they're kind of trying to adapt and overcome. So since we're talking about struggles, I want to get into some of the struggles you faced as an Air Force airman. What led you to become an airman, and how have some of those struggles impacted your life?
I think we'll have to do a part 1 through 15, but if I can sum that up in about 3 or 4 minutes, for me, my journey to becoming an airman was very strange. I mean, I grew up in a very small town that was sandwiched in between 2 relatively big cities. So I tell people I'm from a small town of 6,000, but it was on the doorstep 10 minutes away from a major southern city. So it's kind of weird. I grew up in a small town, but had the influences of a big city right there. My mom was a single parent and did the best she could. My mom worked up to 3 jobs at one time, and I tell people all the time, my mom is a warrior because, she always kept the lights on, always kept food in our house. And we always had what we needed. and she would ensure that we did. And I think that instilled a work ethic in me. But hey, low supervision, not a lot of great role models. You make choices in life. And I made some bad choices, not that I don't ever think I was a bad person, but I made some bad choices for lack of role model, lack of opportunity, lack of whatever. I had no idea what I was going to do. I actually, and I think we'll get into that in a second, I actually was, for a brief 2 to 3 months, I was a high school dropout in my senior year. And I met my recruiter in my senior year, and he was walking around my high school. That's the first time I've ever seen anyone ever in an Air Force uniform. And I talked to him, and he basically said I didn't have the scores to come in the Air Force because I took the ASVAB in the 10th grade. And at that time, my GPA was well below a 2.0, to be honest with you. I was barely making that. Long story short, that guy kind of saw, I don't know what he saw in me, but that guy called me and he picked me up. Long story, he got me where I needed to be on the ASVAB and work with me and got me into the United States Air Force. So I'm very, very appreciative and thankful of Staff Sergeant Todd Remington. We had the same first name. And I'm really appreciative of that man who really took an opportunity, because if he just would have shooed me off, I probably wouldn't have really cared or went back. But he really saw something in me and gave me this opportunity, and I'm forever grateful.
I had the absolute privilege and pleasure to hear you speak at the first annual Air Force Diversity and Inclusion Summit. And you talked about some of your failures. You talked about how you failed the 4th grade, how you failed the 9th grade, and how you were a high school dropout. So my question is, how were you able to overcome all of that and become the command chief of Air University, which is essentially the primary command for all things education?
I spoke about 140, 150 times a year while I was the AU command chief. And I would always say, I'm very transparent about my life, because I think transparency and vulnerability is I think two of the critical components to leadership, because it helps people. Because not everyone at the end of the day started out at the same point in life. And not everyone started out at the same point. So I think as leaders, especially leaders who, and success is it can be any type. Success is not just me finishing up as the AU command chief. I could have finished up as a master sergeant. I could have finished up as a 20-year tech sergeant. And because I overcame all of those things, I still would have said that was a success, because it is. That whole journey is just because AU was my first base as airman and my last base. So just those bookends alone it will just be a story in itself. But how did I overcome? I will tell you, when I was young, I had really low self-esteem. And I had very low self-esteem because I didn't believe that I could ever be anything. And what I tell people, the day you start believing in something bigger than yourself, first of all, but then you start getting that perseverance of I can and I will, and that fire burns in you, no one can take that away from you. So me failing the 4th grade was not because I was a dumb kid. It's because I didn't believe that I was going to do anything in life. So I didn't have those positive influencers. I didn't fail the 9th grade because I was a dumb kid. It's because I didn't have positive influencers. And, high school the same way. I kind of, at some point, I did want to graduate high school. And I did. I ended up graduating because of some great teachers who took a chance on me and brought me back in and essentially graduated me without requirements. I'm very transparent about that. They gave me an opportunity because they knew the power of what a high school diploma would have meant to me. I could not have done certain things if I didn't have a high school diploma. So overcoming those things is, I tell you, I've always had, regardless if it was for something, I always had that fire, I think, in my belly, if it wasn't to do bad things or good things or whatever you want to say. I came into the Air Force with a huge deficit, and I did not know what my deficit was until I joined the Air Force. I had issues being on track with the other people. When I was an airman and realized that I wasn't getting the academics as much as other people, I knew in basic training that I had to study more. So I relentlessly studied that book they gave us. I relentlessly studied. I'm talking about all day, every day. I knew I had to. And that was my first instant to know what hard work and putting in the hard work meant. Because I studied that book. I had a problem memorizing things. I had a problem regurgitating things. I was really afraid because it was tied to I'm sure other people in my BMT flight may have felt like, but for me, failing BMT wasn't an option because I had no plan B. So that book became that barrier of that book became what I can fold clothes with the best of them. I can march with the best of them. I'm super in shape. That wasn't a concern. That book was the concern. So I studied, and I scored the highest in my BMT flight. And that showed me right there that if you put the work in, even if you have challenges, even if you got to work 10 times harder than the people who are smart. I had some super smart people in my BMT flight. They went on to be, linguists and EOD techs and all of these different things. And that day at 18 years old, when I scored the highest on my BMT test, and the TI told me that in the day room, the first day in my life realized that I wasn't less than other people. That if I worked, I can overcome anything. That was, I remember that so clearly to this day, that aha moment. I always ask people, what's your lifetime aha moment? And that was my lifetime aha moment, that work equal this. I have a known that I read on a 10th grade reading level joining the Air Force. They tested me when I got to my first base because this barrier kept reappearing. When I got to my first base and I got CDCs, I had trouble with my CDCs. I could not score high on those end of course tests because I didn't know how to study, but they got me a reading exam and I was reading at a lower level. And then another staff sergeant enters my life, Staff Sergeant Lisa Gentry Stanley, and she teaches me how to study. She teaches me how the UREs work, and she teaches me that just don't try to read that whole book and try to regurgitate every word in it. And I ended up getting through all volumes of my CDCs with no problem. So then another guy enters by and tells me to take an English class, Master Sergeant James Dixon. And then so on and so on. I was so blessed to have these people who continued to challenge me. And it was difficult every time I was challenged. So by the time I was long story short, by the time I was a tech sergeant, I had a master's degree. And by the time I was had a line number for master, I was teaching my first college class for a university. For me to end up as the AU command chief, I can't put words into it. I know that there's divine intervention in my life because who I was, who I believed I was, something never allowed me to settle for that, ever. And, I could have easily, I tell people my career would have been awesome if I would have not done half the things I did. But something kept pushing me to continually be better, continue to be better. And it's a difference between being better and being the best. I never strived to be the best at anything. I never tried to want to be Airman of the Year, NCO of the Year, Senior NCO of the Year. I didn't strive. Those things I did have accolades, but that's not ever what I was striving. I was striving to be a better human being. I was striving to be better Todd Simmons. I was always striving to be better at who I can be. Not to be the best at anything. It's a complete difference. And I tell you, and that's still today, I'm always striving to be better every day. If I'm reading something, I went back to school as a master sergeant and got a second master's degree. I am relentless on getting your education. I'm relentless. Ever since I was a young NCO staff sergeant, anyone who's ever worked for me knows that you come to Sergeant Simmons, Master Sergeant Simmons, Chief Simmons' office, he's going to talk about how you can be the best of you. Whatever that means, and everything else is secondary. And so I became known for that type of person who's passionate about teaching, passionate about education. And so, a few years ago, I kind of mutually met this person through a friend who was also interested in teaching. And that's one thing I've always told people that, in the military, that I've gotten a lot of people hired at a lot of universities. So him and I were talking about teaching. We were through a mutual friend, and we were actually met on Facebook Messenger some years ago when we were, talking about teaching. Then later, we kept talking, and then one day, this person becomes the Chief Master Sergeant here. So, I'm out at Edwards Air Base, being the command chief out there, loving every second of it. And then just one day, I got a call from, Chief Master Sergeant Air Force Wright, who I'm very grateful and indebted to, and asked me for an opportunity if I would like to compete for Air University. And I will tell you, initially, I did not want to ever come back to university. I'm just going to be honest with you. I was excited about that because of what a history of that place had for me as a young 19-year-old kid. I was excited about the job of what it could be, but I wasn't excited about going back to Air University and the challenges I had there as a young man. So for me, initially wasn't excited. Once I got in the seat of the job, I tell you, if I could have stayed there for 4 or 5 years, I would. It was the best opportunity that I've ever had to really affect change and really inspire people to know that they can be better, at anything they do. That this institution really gives folks an opportunity to be better at everything, at leading, at being emotional leaders, at being better Air University just touched everything from junior ROTC to ROTC to our most senior officers in the Air Force, to our most senior enlisted in the Air Force. What an opportunity for someone who's passionate about learning, passionate about teaching, passionate about people developing. I could not have written an ending to a career any better. I feel like I had the greatest ending of career. I tell Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, I feel like I had the greatest ending of career because it was the job that was meant for me.
What advice would Chief Master Sergeant retired Todd Simmons give to Airman Basic Todd Simmons?
Easy. I would actually give him a lot of advice, probably 2 hours in my office. But if I had 10 seconds, I met an airman at a base a month and a half ago when I was retired and I was speaking. This airman grew up 10 minutes away from me. And he came up to me after the resiliency briefing. He was telling me some of the challenges that he had. And through those challenges, I saw myself in this young man because he's from a similar area. And I would give Todd Simmons the same advice I gave this young man. Never give up, no matter how challenged. Never give up and only approach the hard things first. So go write your list about what's difficult. I only approach those things first. Don't go to easy. Don't take anything easy. If you know that you have a learning challenge or a learning disability, approach that first. I knew that math is the most difficult subject that I would ever tackle. But you know what I did? I was willing to fail it 3 times and pay the government back 3 times. I was willing to humble myself and get a C-130 navigator to sit in the community center with me and teach me math at night. I was willing to partner with who's now an active duty Chief Master Sergeant out at Ellsworth. At the time, she was a young NCO in our orderly room. I was willing to partner with her because she had some of the same challenges and us pass math together. I was willing to take the hard things first. That's the advice that I would give any young person. Look at what's difficult that you perceive as difficulties and tackle those things first. When you condition yourself to make the easy choices, you condition yourself to give yourself excuses of why you can't overcome the difficult things. Because the difficult things are difficult for a reason, right? It took me 1.5 years to pass college algebra. That's what I tell people. The barrier to me getting a bachelor's degree or community college of the Air Force associate's degree was college algebra. And it took me almost 1.5 years to pass that class because I had zero math foundation. Zero. I mean, I'm talking about I was starting from basic, pretty much middle school math. And I had to learn 1.5 years of math before I can take, which is essentially the entry requirement for mathematics in college. So I will say advice, do what's difficult first.
Chief, what does a command chief expect from brand new officers?
I would say with any chief, and I would even want to break it down a little bit more. I'll answer both that question too, but I will start with what any enlisted person respects from a brand new officer is for you to lead, I would say first and foremost, expectation is you can graduate from college May 1st and be commissioned May 2nd. On May 3rd, if you're at your base, we expect you to lead. It's a difference is we don't expect you to know everything, but we do expect you to have a leadership presence, to understand that to understand that your sacred oath that you took is to be in charge of me in the greatest of days and in the worst of days. First and foremost, what does a senior NCO want from a brand new lieutenant? A senior NCO wants the same exact thing that I just said, and also a partnership. A partnership of understanding that you are in charge, but sir or ma'am, let me make you successful. You don't have to do what I say, but I really would love you to listen to what I have to say, which is a complete difference. And that's what I try to explain to brand new lieutenants. A senior NCO should never try to circumvent your authority, ever. The relationship between you as a master sergeant and you as a lieutenant has to be one of partnership. Doesn't mean that the partnership is 50-50 and or 51-49 and the master sergeant gets the extra percent. No, a partnership is a mutual respect that this person may have a decade and a half, right or wrong, of experience on you, and they may be wrong. Their advice may not always be the correct advice to you, but you have to listen. You don't have to do, but you have to listen. All wise leaders have counsel. Don't matter what rank you are. All wise leaders have counsel. Even if you're a king, if you're a dictator, if you're a president or a chancellor, you all have some sort of counsel. Every leader has some sort of counsel. But all leaders don't listen to 100% of the counsel, but they take all pieces and they form hopefully a good decision. A chief expects a lieutenant to be those first two things and more. Because as a chief, I expect presence of leadership. I expect you to form partnerships with the senior NCOs. And I expect you to look at my relationship with you as an amplifier to what that senior NCO relationship is. I'm the person that you should be able to close the door with and humble yourself. Because I should have reached maturity at that level as a chief for you to come in and close the door and be like, hey, chief, I'm struggling. What would you do? And you to, even if it's with your commander. And my only job as a chief to a lieutenant is to really, really steer you in the right direction, how to deal with the commander, how to deal with the enlisted force, how to deal with your peers. Look at me as your person. And the relationship has to be that I salute second lieutenants just as sharp as I salute a 4-star. I tell a second lieutenant, you are in charge. You are in charge of me. So because I'm older and I'm a chief, I have high expectations that you will do the right thing. I have high expectations, but you are in charge, sir. You are in charge. And that's so for a chief or a command chief, whatever chiefdom that you operate in, the expectation is the same. That you are a person who has a leadership presence, that you are a person who understands your partnership with your senior NCO counterparts, and that you understand what a chief does in the United States Air Force and how valuable they can be for you if you develop a relationship with them. Pretty much, I answer that in 3 parts because I think it's important just to not go with what a chief says, because there are so many different buckets and it's difficult. I understand you're 22. Most of our lieutenants are 22. Some of them are older, prior enlisted. But even if you're a prior enlisted, I tell the same thing to a prior enlisted lieutenant. You know, if you're a master sergeant and now you're a lieutenant, I go, guess what? The worst thing you can do is be a master sergeant with butter bars. The worst thing you can ever do in your life is try to perform as a master sergeant who's now a second lieutenant, because it's different. And not only is it different, those airmen and NCOs, the senior NCOs that you lead, they only see that butter bar. They almost can care less if you used to be a master sergeant. They want you to now be the person who advocates them as an officer in the United States Air Force. They have a master sergeant. That's not you.
Chief, we're going to wrap this thing up. Where can people find you?
People can find me. I'm out on social media, Instagram, Facebook, at Courageous Lead 3, at Courageous Lead 3, Courageous Leadership Alliance. Either you go Courageous Leadership Alliance or at Courageous Lead 3 on all social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Shout out to us. Definitely out there doing some good things with some great partners. You know, I call them building a team of culture warriors. That's what we're doing, because it's about changing the culture, right? It's about, if you believe in certain things, I believe in empathy, vulnerability, and believability. If you can do those 3 things in leadership, then you can go down in history as being one of the best leaders ever.
All right, everybody. I want to thank you all for joining us on this episode of Mentorship Moment. Chief, you did an absolutely phenomenal job, man. I am so grateful to have you as a mentor of mine. You have no idea. Even when I mess up, you'll pull me to the side and be like, hey, Cap, you get that figured out. It's like, all right, Chief, I got you.
Yeah, I'm going to give you advice. I ain't going to do it for you.
Any last words you got for the folks at home?
No, I just appreciate you and so many leaders across, I won't even say the Air Force, because I've probably met more people in DOD since I retired working with them. But I appreciate leaders like you, sir, who are stepping up. And it reminds me of what we just talked about. You can just go and be a great officer, and you can go about your business, make the next rank, do the next thing, you can go do that. But you're stepping outside of what is the norm of what we have always seen as traditional leaders. And you're doing something like this. And I just appreciate you for doing that. I can name off 24 people I've seen do this in the last couple of months, but I appreciate you because in the officer realm, I don't see a lot of it going on. And this just gives a human aspect of who Russell Lewis is and what you believe in for the folks who follow you, either under you, peer-wise, or above you. And I just want to say, this is the example to your listeners. This is the example of what 21st century leadership looks like in the United States Air Force. And I know it's difficult to put yourself out on a limb, but this is what we're talking about. We need leaders of courage. We need leaders who are willing to be vulnerable. We need leaders who are willing to be believable. And sir, you are a believable leader. So I appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate that, Chief. It really means a lot. We're going to have to wrap this up because I'm about to get emotional. So everybody, we'll catch you all next time. Chief, thank you. And we'll see you all soon.